Hello, everyone. I'm going to tell you to go ahead and keep eating while we get started, because we promised you, and more importantly, promised our guests that we would try to have them out of here so they can get back to work. I'm Dr. Liz Wilson, the Dean of the School of Business here at Georgia Southwestern, and I think I know many of you, but welcome to all of you and congratulations. Isaac Avia is going to introduce our panelists, but I want to tell you that I remember them when they were where you are. And so that tells you how long I've been here. Yeah, a long time ago. They just graduated, 2 years ago, right? Yeah. But it also shows you, if you looked on the back of your program or inside the program, you can see a little bit about them, and I think Isaac is going to tell you a little bit about them as well. They've all succeeded exceptionally well, and one of the things I'm most proud about is that I know them all to be very ethical people, and that's one of the reasons we wanted them to be there, because you have had to make ethical decisions as you've navigated your coursework, but you're going to be called on to make ethical decisions that have a much more far-reaching impact than simply deciding whether to properly cite something that you took from the internet or whether to allow somebody to look on your paper. So hopefully they will give you some good kinds of things for you to think about as you leave, and also maybe some guidance about things that you may face in your challenges. So I'm going to turn this over to Isaac, our moderator, and want to welcome Doug and Kim and Will. We're so happy that they could come back and share their time with us. So thank you, and we'll give this to Isaac now.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. And I'd just like to start by just giving a brief introduction of who I am and what my experience has been here. I am a marketing major. I've been here 4 years as an athlete. I'm the current president of Enactus, and I will be graduating in December. And I'd just like to welcome this wonderful panel thank them for being out here with us, and I know their time is very valuable, so we'll get along with it. And I'd just like for them to give a personal bio of themselves and what they've done so far.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Will Peterson. As Dr. Liz Wilson indicated, I am a product of Southwestern, both from a undergraduate as well as a master's degree. Like Isaac, I arrived at Southwestern as an athlete playing baseball, and fell in love with the campus and the community, and believe it or not, I'm still here 16 years after the fact. And so my present role with BB Putney Health System, I am the corporate director, assistant vice president of human resources, which encompasses a lot of things, but overall compensation, benefits, employee health and wellness. And my wife Brooke is also an alumni of Southwestern, and I'm presently chair of the board of trustees for our foundation, so we bleed Hurricane Blue.
All right, my name is Kim Nalen. I came down here from Noonan, Georgia. I work for Eaton Corporation in Peachtree City, Georgia. I am the senior human resources manager for our campus there. I also have some facilities in North Carolina and Virginia in our divisional sales force. Same thing kind of as well. My role is to be a business partner for all those groups that I represent and partner with on just talent assessment, talent effectiveness, organizational structure, employee relations, and obviously deal with any ethical issues that come up. I graduated from here as well with my undergraduate in human resources. I have my master's degree from here as well. Came here the same way Will did, as far as on a basketball scholarship. So I played here for all 4 years, and we were 2-time regional champions and went to the national tournament. So I had an awesome experience here at GSW. So it's really glad to be back here today. I am married with 2 kids. Actually, one of them birthday is today. She turns 10. So I will be going back home when I'm done. And then I have another one whose birthday is tomorrow, and she'll be turning 6. So there you go.
Hello, my name is Doug Moses. I'm originally from a small town called Osler, Georgia. I don't know if most of you have heard of that. Very small town with 2 traffic lights in South Georgia. I came to Southwestern in '93 and got my bachelor's degree in accounting in 1997. One of the coolest things I was able to do while being here at Southwestern, and I'm always telling this story when I get a chance, is I had the opportunity to do an international internship for 7 months in France, targeting France, at a former subsidiary of General Motors called Delphi Automotive Systems in their accounting department. While I was there, I also did an independent study for 2 intermediate accounting courses, 1 and 2, which allowed me to graduate within 4 years. And I also played basketball over there. I didn't get a chance to play basketball here at Southwestern, but I did get a chance to play over there for the local team. So it was a fantastic experience that I had the opportunity to do. Upon graduating from here, I went on to Georgia Southern and got my MBA in accounting in 1999 and started working for Malden Jenkins out of our Macon office. I was there in Macon for like 5 years, transferred to our Atlanta office, and I've been there ever since, going into my 18th year. I've been a partner with Malden Jenkins since 2009, and I do governmental audits. Very fun. I always knew I wanted to be a government auditor. No. Never saw that coming, actually. But we have 3 offices in Georgia, Atlanta, Macon, and Albany, 1 in Birmingham, Alabama, 1 in Bradenton, Florida, 1 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and recently we acquired a CPA firm in Columbia, South Carolina. So we almost made a complete circle, working on North Carolina now. My wife, Yolanda Moses, is also a GS alum. I didn't meet her here when I was attending college. I came back a few years later and met her. She has a computer science degree, and she currently is working at Abbott Laboratories as a programmer. And we have 2 daughters, Camille, who's 10, and Gabrielle, who's 8 years old. And they keep us busy, or if you would ask them, they'll say we keep them busy in track. Just recently, my youngest daughter finished 5th in the nation in the 200 meters at the USATF Junior Olympics in Kansas. Made it to the semifinals in the 100 meters, and this is their 2nd year doing track. And my oldest one is more of a distance runner. She just qualified for the Junior Olympics in cross country in 3,000 meters. And so we'll be going to Tallahassee, Florida next week to support her in that run. So, but that's pretty much it.
Well, as you can see, we have a very successful panel up here. But we'll move it along and get with the first question. So, first question is, how is ethics relevant in your industry, and what changes have you seen?
I'm going to jump in there and get us started. So, relative to ethics in the workplace, one of the things that within a healthcare setting that we find is the reality of our industry has found itself to kind of take a step back from the word ethics and really find ourselves having discussions and more from a foundational aspect around the word civility. And the reality of it is civility and ethics are some people may view them as one and the same when in essence they are 2 different things. And one would argue that you can't be ethical without first being civil. And so within our organization, obviously, interaction with patients, interaction with patient family members, and the sensitivity around the information that we deal with in the healthcare industry has lended itself to some significant oversight, enhancements, as well as advancements in the realm of ethics. And so for us, one of the things that we have found ourselves doing over the last couple of years is drawing a greater emphasis on civility. And so our belief is that if we can establish that foundational component first, with that become more of an ethical individual. And in terms of what changes have we seen, I mean, obviously, as we continue to employ multiple generations, for those of you guys that are preparing to step into the business world, one of the things you're going to realize is you're stepping into an unprecedented employee environment in that we employ more generations now than we ever have in terms of the various generations, anywhere from baby boomers to the millennials and beyond. And so there's a different interpretation and a different perception in terms of what it means to be civil and ethical based upon those different generations. And so, we find ourselves obviously somewhat evolving, if you will, into a society that condones and somewhat accepts the realities of the lack of ethics. And so as a result of that, one of the things that we find ourselves as employers and HR professionals is that the level of tolerance and the mechanisms that we deploy in our workforce to guard and monitor and react to unethical behavior has enhanced as a result of that. And so I'm a talker, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Kim.
You're fine. You're fine. I would say, I'm in a manufacturing industry, right? And so, our company, as you look at it, obviously one is global. We're a $20 billion a year company. And so I would say, honestly, it's crucial in our industry. And from all aspects. One, from employees, right? And even two is getting into our businesses, right? Globally, we deal with government, right? We deal with suppliers, we deal with customers, right? And so there's an important piece of ethics in each one of those arms of how we do business. So I would say it's crucial to our success. It's crucial from our customers' point of view to making sure that they feel comfortable doing business with us. It is crucial from suppliers, right? I've even seen instances where suppliers, if they're an extension of us, right? And so if there's unethical things going on within the supplier, then we need to find a way to do business elsewhere. And in order for us to be successful at the end of the day, one, I don't think we get employees that want to come work for an unethical company at the end of the day, right? We've been recognized as far as our company the last 10 years as being one of the most ethical companies to work for within the Fortune 500. And so sustaining that reputation, it gives us a competitive advantage. And so being able to, one, sustain that it is crucial for us and crucial for our success. I would tell you the importance of it is being a large corporation, we have a dedicated office for global ethics where we work on compliance, we work on training, we work on giving an avenue for employees to call and report or ask questions, different things like that. So, within our company, it is one of the top advantages that we have. When we look at new employees that want to come join our company, they recognize that, they see that, and so that gives us that advantage to be able to do that. So sustaining that, making sure at the end of the day that how we conduct our business is just as important as what we're bringing into as far as sales or into the door. How we go about doing that is just as important, and you will hear that all the way from our CEO down to someone on the production floor. Our CEO, and I've seen it before, we will walk away from business if it requires us to be unethical or doing it in a manner that is against our company values. So I would say it's crucial. And I would say it's been that way. It will continue to be that way. I think more and more pressures, as far as if you look at society and different things that happen, the pressures are always there. So we see a little bit, unfortunately, some more instances of things that we need to deal with. But I think at the end of the day, within our company, we take a zero tolerance kind of stance on being ethical and how we handle ourselves. Especially each employee being representatives of our company. So.
Okay. Thank you. Well, in the accounting profession, it is very important. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the AICPA, is the professional organization that's responsible for developing these ethical values that we have to follow as CPAs and professional accountants. And it requires us as CPAs and accountants to be responsible when providing these accounting and auditing services to our clients and when reviewing client financial information. They really focus on 3 core areas when you're looking at ethical value standards with the AICPA that the professional accountants have to follow. 1 is the integrity, 2, objectivity and independence, and 3 is due care. With integrity, you have to be honest and candid when dealing with client information. If you're a controller at a company and where your bonuses are tied to the performance of the company's profits, and you're manipulating the financial information so that you and your colleagues can get these bonuses, you're not upholding integrity there. You're not being honest and candid with that information. The second thing is objectivity and independence. You should act free of conflict of interest and avoid those business relationships that shouldn't be entered into when providing auditing and accounting services. I do governmental audits. My father is a councilman for the city of Osceola. Would it be okay for me to pick up that audit and serve as the engagement partner when my father is the governing, serves on that governing body? It's not. I wouldn't be independent. Or if I have a client that calls me up and say, "Hey, Doug, we had some major turnover in our accounting department. We lost some key individuals. We're like 8 months behind on our bank reconciliation process. Can you come in and help us get caught up?" Is it okay for me to go in there and say, "Okay, no problem. This will be the fee." We go in and get them caught up, and then through their fiscal year end, and then 3 months after their fiscal year end, we come out and do the audit. Are we independent? We're not. And some of the changes that we've seen in recent years with the AICPA issuing these clarity standards, they really spell out what is deemed to be independent and not independent. And you can't provide accounting services to an auditee client and still maintain your independence. Another thing they look at is if you're going and making hundreds of journal entries at year end and then turn around and doing the audit, are you independent? Another thing they talked about is preparing financial statements. If I have a small city and the city clerk is the finance director, no one in the accounting department has an accounting degree. No one can assume responsibility for these financial statements, but we come in and prepare those financial statements. Are we independent? And we're not. So with recent changes to the clarity standards, and they really spell out what is deemed independent and what is not deemed, what is independence. Another area with due care, which requires auditors and accountants to make sure that they're adhering to all of the technical and ethical standards. And the 2 things that it really focuses on is education and experience, and make sure that you're following generally accepted accounting principles. If I had an audit going on and I had a brand new staff on that audit who has no experience with no supervision, is that okay? Am I adhering to the due care standard? And I'm not. I should have at least a manager or a supervisor or senior out there on that engagement and supervising that staff with less experience. Also, the AICPA requires all CPAs to maintain a certain level of CPE credit hours on an annual basis. That's continuing professional education classes that we have to maintain every year. One of the things I've noticed when I first started with the firm in 1999, the Government Accounting Standards Board came out with GASB 34. That was a huge standard. It really required all governments, from federal, state, local, to change up their financial reporting model. You had a lot of smaller CPAs out there that only done maybe 1 or 2 governmental audits as filler work because their main focus was on preparing tax returns. They had to get out of the business because they didn't want to keep up with all these new standards. Some stayed in it and weren't following things correctly. 18 years later, we're at GASB statement number probably 85, 86. A lot has changed, and we have to stay abreast to all these changes and make sure that we're implementing these standards correctly and that our clients are aware of these standards. One of the things that our governmental practice has started doing probably about 6 or 7 years ago is providing free educational classes to our clients. They can earn up to like 28 hours of CPE credit on an annual basis. So we want to keep them abreast of all these changes, go over hot topics that we think they should be aware of. So again, that's crucial for providing due care professional standards, make sure that you adhere to all of that. So again, integrity, make sure you're independent, and then make sure you have the expertise and the experience to conduct these services.
Yeah, thank you for that. And coming from a graduating senior, one of the best attributes a company can have is having a good company culture. So with that being said, how do you assess ethical attributes or characteristics when hiring?
So actually, if we look at new hires coming in or through our interview process, one of our leadership attributes that we define as a company is being ethical. So obviously, anyone that we are looking at joining the organization, we are going to assess that, make sure that they fit into part of our culture. We do that through a lot of probably situational scenarios as we talk with people that we bring in, because one, we want to make sure getting into those situations, if you become one of our employees, right, that we want to make sure that you would be able to handle that in the correct way. So we do a lot of situational interviews, and as far as past experience, we may give them, if they're coming, let's say, into a procurement position into our organization, right, they're going to be dealing with a lot of outside vendors, things like that. We may give them some scenarios that they may come into just to see how they handle. You'd be surprised some of the answers that you get, right, and you'll be able to evaluate how they would be for you in the future. But I would say it's a critical piece. It is, we have the leadership attributes defined. Ethical is being one of those, and so being able to put them in situations as we look for them to come into our organization and how would they handle that is a good judge of how they're going to do that in the future. So that's kind of how we do it.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we do is for all candidates, we're gonna do a background check, on all candidates. We also will do a Google search. Search your name and see what pops up. We look at all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of those, to kind of see, what kind of things that you're posting, kind of see what kind of character that you may have, because we need to make sure that we're hiring someone that's going to be trustworthy. We deal with a lot of sensitive client information, and we need to know that we can trust you. But that's some of the things that we do. We may even do, we may even look at your credit score. If you have a bad credit score, can we really trust you around our clients' assets? And that could be a kind of judge your character from that standpoint as well. So we kind of look at a lot of different things, just kind of get a feel for that person, and looking at those various attributes. But we also, what we do is we have an intern program that we bring a lot of kids in from various universities, and we get a feel for them from that point of view as well. And sometimes these internships can last 3 months, and we take them out on the audits and just kind of see how they conduct themselves. And so we get a lot of feedback from that intern program as well. And one of the things that the University of Georgia has, they have an intern for a day a program, and we'll have one intern to come along and kind of shadow a partner or a manager on an engagement just for one day. And a lot of times we can get a good feel for that person just with that interaction.
So what Doug is saying to you graduating seniors, social media is huge.
Yeah.
We look, so be careful what you're posting.
Exactly.
Just to add to that, I indicated before that I came to Southwestern via baseball, and there was a rough and gruff head baseball coach we had at that time named Haywood, and I struggled hitting curveballs. And I remember, after striking out, I'd hang my head, walk back to the dugout, and Haywood would just look at me and say, "There's just some things you can't coach." And and the reality of it is, when we talk about ethics, one of the things that I think that we all have to wrap our heads around with the reality that there's just some things you can't coach. And when you talk about ethics, a lot of it is an inherent DNA, if you will, relative to an individual themselves. And but one of the things you'll find, Harvard Business Review actually they did a study last year, and you can Google this, to where they actually identified 6 personal traits that can predict an individual's ability to act in an ethical manner. And one of the things that there are a variety of things: conscientiousness, assertiveness, loyalty, things that aren't any surprises. But as you think about the concept of ethics and the efforts that employers take in evaluating the predictability of an individual's ethical behavior, one of the things that you all are going to be introduced to, which some of us were not potentially when we were entering the workforce, is that ethical use. The word ethics, ethical, used to be more of a buzzword. How did you define ethics? How did you predict ethics? How did you monitor ethics? How did you manage ethics? It's now becoming scientific. I attribute that to, when you think about in healthcare, in manufacturing, and a lot of other settings, there used to be a real fluffy word out there called efficiency. Okay, how did you do things more efficiently? But there was really no definition, no monitoring of how you manage those. Whereas now, people go to school to manage and monitor and produce efficient processes. It is now a scientific approach to driving efficiencies. And I honestly believe that over the course of your entry into the workforce and over the next couple of years to come, you're going to see more emphasis on nailing down the science of predictable ethics and predictable behaviors. One of the things that we're already deploying in our work is, for all new hires, you go through a behavioral assessment, which is a scientific assessment of your behavioral qualities, characteristics, and attributes, which gives us a prediction to how you may or may not respond to certain scenarios. And we use that as a pretty strong tool to determine, do you progress yourself through our hiring process to eventually become an employee of ours. So, don't take lightly the word ethic and the significance of ethical behavior. And as Kim and others have alluded to, you have more eyes looking at you now than ever before through the avenues of social media. I joke all the time with people, if there was a such thing as Facebook when I was coming through college, I can assure you I would not be sitting at the table today. And so, the realities are that you have to be extremely conscious that there is a 24/7 access to your behavior, and employers are now picking up on that. They're looking at, there was a recent graduate of Georgia Southwestern who was interviewing and applying for Secret Service. And I was actually contacted as a character interviewee on behalf of this individual. And it was amazing to me. And you hear the stories of Secret Service assessments. They talk to you next door neighbors. They talk to you third grade teacher. But what was amazing to me was to sit down with this federal agent, and for this individual who had just graduated from Georgia Southwestern to have a listing of all sites that he had clicked on through the avenue of social media, wanting to know that I think, was there any, commitment, any correlation between his accessing this website versus that website, or a like on Facebook versus things of that nature. And so it was astounding to me, just the degree to which technology can dive into the personal realm of an individual. So to Kim's point, be conscious of that, okay? Because employers are now going to that degree in evaluating an individual's ethical makeup.
As we're on the topic of graduating seniors entering the workforce, what advice do you have for us graduating seniors for entering the workforce?
All right. This is going to be geared towards graduating seniors as well as others who are juniors. I would say, first of all, if you still got some time in school, make sure you keep your GPA up. Your GPA is going to get you in the door for an interview, okay? I was talking with one of the partners in charge of our Atlanta office a few months ago, and he was doing some interviews with some UGA students. And he was like, I know this is a good accounting program there. I know they got good GPAs. I know they're strong students. He said, but within 5 minutes of conversing with them in an interview process, I can determine whether or not I'm going to hire them as an intern or as an employee. The first 5 minutes. So work on selling yourself, okay? Be engaging in the interview process, have some personality, because they want to feel that you can fit into the culture. We want to be able to see that you can interact on a professional level when dealing with our clients, okay? So I say work on selling yourself, when you're going through these interview processes. The second thing I would say is something that my high school math teacher told me. And I'm not big on a lot of quotes. Will has a ton of quotes that he can give me. He can recite all day long. But I do remember this one quote that this math teacher told me in my senior year. She said, Doug, when you start college and you start your career, remember to postpone self-gratification until you reach your goals. And that stuck with me. It stuck with me in college. I had to sit out a year before coming to college to help my mom out. And so when I had the opportunity to come to college, I wanted to focus on my academics, and I did. When I started working at Malden & Jenkins, I had a goal. I wanted to pass the CPA exam within 2 years. And it was hard, working all day long, traveling, and then, having to find time to study. On the weekends, it's a beautiful day outside, but here I am on a Saturday morning and afternoon studying for the exam. But I had to remember, I had to postpone those self-gratification moments to reach that goal. Another thing I would say is have you a plan of action, a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, and a 10-year plan. When I started working at Malden Jenkins that first year, I just wanted to get my hands wrapped around how to do an audit. Learn their policies and procedures, and to do well as a staff accountant. My 2-year plan was to pass the CPA exam within 2 years. My 5-year plan was to become a manager in a particular niche. And then my 10-year plan was to be at a certain salary and to be a partner and within the firm, and that happened. All of that happened. Now I still have those same 1, 2, 5, 10-year plans. Now, since I'm approaching 45 years old, I have a 20-year plan as well. So I say to you, just make sure you have those plan of actions, and just remember to kind of postpone self-gratification until you reach your goals, because I've seen a lot of kids come work for us, and they're burnt out from undergrad and grad school, and they just want to go out and have a great time. I asked my staff, did you study this weekend? No, I went to a bar, I went to this game, just coming up with all these excuses. And now they're 4 and 5 years in and haven't passed the CPA exam. And they're still at a staff 2, and they have this new person that's 2 years in that's passed, and now they're a senior, and they're telling them what to do because they haven't passed the exam, they haven't been promoted. So just remember that. Just postpone self-gratification until you reach your goals, and you'll be fine.
All right. So from my perspective, if I think about it first from just an ethics point of view, right? One is find a company, right, that doesn't go against your personal ethics. Because there's business ethics. Obviously, that we have guidelines as far as how we want you to represent our company, right? And then there's your personal ethics as well, right? And so make sure that the company that you're going into, right, is not forcing the business ethics, which may conflict with your personal ethics, right? And then, as well, I guess the second piece for that for ethics is if you ever get into a situation where you've got to stop and think, wait a minute, okay? It's always still that one scenario of, hey, would I be proud of what I'm doing, if I go home and tell my husband or my family, right? Or if you end up on the news, right? Or if you've ever got to stop and think, or that one little, uncomfortable in your stomach, ask questions, okay? Don't ever put yourself into that situation. I've come across plenty of situations where it affects their career, it affects their family, it affects them in so many ways when they've kind of made that wrong choice because they didn't ask questions. And so from an ethical standpoint, I would say those are kind of two of the pieces of advice I would give you. And then, obviously just in general, I see a lot of the younger generations now kind of coming into the workforce, and they do have the timelines. And I am all about everybody being very hungry, right, and wanting to grow that career. But don't make it all about the timeline, okay? Well, it's 2 years, it's time, no matter where you are, right? Make it about getting involved, making sure you do have a complete aspect of all of that job, right? It may take a little longer than those 2 years, right? But if you're showing that you're still career driven, that you're hungry, that you want to be involved in projects outside of just your regular scope, right? Or, finding out a different function, right? Take the time to do that, and then the timeline will come, right? I have a whole lot of discussions these days of, well, it's 2 years. I've been 2 years in my job. What's next? I'm like, but have you learned this aspect about your job? Have you been involved in this? What have you shown, right? Don't focus on the timeline, focus on your contribution at the end of the day, and the timeline will come.
So all great points, and nothing really to add to that other than, one of the things that when I was getting out of school and was looking for my next step in life, one of the things I was interning with a local manufacturing company just north of here, and when I was graduated from undergraduate and pursuing my MBA, that was when the really the technical / financial bubble busted. And so the opportunity for new grads to find opportunity for employment was near to none. And I remember sitting down and going home one day, and my granddad was really my mentor in life and business, and he was an owner of a manufacturing company, Woolrich, and he actually sat down with me. He said, one of the codes that I've lived by all my life, he said, he referred to it as DEA, and he said, I want you to remember this. He said, as you're coming out of school, he said, there's several elements, and while my granddad was in manufacturing and an operator, his roots were really in HR, in people management, and he prided himself as being, in 60 years, his manufacturing never lost an unemployment claim, and because he felt that you treat people fair and everything else will follow accordingly. But from a DEA perspective, and this is what I pass along to you in closing, is that as you're entering into the workforce and you're sitting in front of people like Doug and Kim and myself, there's a couple things that I think we would all agree that we look for. Because the reality of it is, resumes are a dime a dozen. We have GPAs 3+, proven an individual's ability to sit in the class, pass a test, and graduate. Okay. What an employer is looking for is what is that differentiating factor? What sets you apart? Okay, and one of the things that you've got to make sure that you do a good job of is you've got to illustrate and echo to that individual that you're applying with, to that employer, is what's the differentiating factor with you. Okay, the E of that is you've got to prove your willingness to engage. You know, so one of the things that as I'm talking to people that are coming out of school, and the reality of it is, this is actually starting. I'm becoming to realize that this is not just the realities of a college graduate trying to enter the workforce. These are now becoming the realities of a high school graduate trying to enter college. These are the things that colleges are now starting to use as filtering criteria as to whether or not they are going to allow a student into their institution. But you not only have to show that element of differentiation, but you've got to show that proven willingness to engage. Because as an employer, guys, you know what? I mean, there is something to be said with you coming into the workforce with a proven elevated IQ. I mean, don't get me wrong. We need people that are intellectually sound, but we are looking for people that are willing to commit and engage, and allocate themselves accordingly to provide the services that we're in the business of providing. It's like I tell people, you use that degree as a ticket to get you inside that interview process, but the reality of it is that you have to prove and sell yourself within that interview, and you have to do it through differentiating yourself, proving your engagement, and then proving your assertiveness. Okay, you've got to assert yourself in such a manner that registers on the minds of Kim and Doug and Will when we leave that day, that sets you apart from the 12 other applicants that are applying for the same job that you're applying for. Okay, whether that's additional follow-ups, things of that nature. When I was coming out of graduate school, and I shared with you, I was working as an intern in the financial bubble busted. One of the things that my granddad convinced me to do was and my internship was ending, and I was going to go back and work on our family farm, and he says, you need to go back and continue that internship. And I said, well, they ain't going to pay me. He said, it doesn't matter. He says, what they will pay you isn't even close to the value that you'll get in experience. He said, because I'm telling you, employers are going to be looking for that experience. He said, and when you finally get that interview, he said, you have got to assert yourself. And so when I finally had my interview at Phoebe Putney, I applied for a job I wasn't qualified for, not even close. But there was differentiation in my resume that intrigued someone enough to meet with me. And when I met with the senior vice president of HR, I joked people, my interview with that executive lasted for 5 minutes. It was one question. And when I sat down with her, she looked at me, she says, where do you want to be in 5 years? And without hesitation, I looked right at her and I said, I want to be sitting in your chair. And so it was that assertiveness that led to the next day an unqualified individual with 6 months of experience was able to secure employment where I still reside today. And from an engagement perspective, Ms. Knowles later shared with me, she said, it wasn't just your answer. She said, but when I was able to follow up with your past employer, and he communicated to me that you were willing to stay on and work and be committed and be engaged for a duration of 6 or 8 months without being paid so that you could just gain experience in your field, she said, that's when I knew you were someone I wanted on our team. And so you've got to differentiate yourself, prove that engagement, and be assertive. Do not, some people advise against that. I'm advising you to be assertive. Not to the point of rude, but be assertive in your interview and engagement with potential employers down the road.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful insight. I know this is all great advice that us seniors are going to take with us long after we graduate. But we're going to open it up to Q&A, but before we do that, is there anything that the panel would like to add?
I'll tell you about this situation we had with the staff. We had picked up this new audit engagement, and it didn't go well. I think the contract fee was for like $30,000. And so we finally got the job done, and the partner went back to the manager, the client, and said, hey, we had some issues, we had to work this out. and you know, we had some cost overruns of about $15,000. You know, if y'all can meet us halfway on that. And the client said, no, we're not paying you anything over the contract amount because your staff was here surfing the internet. They were tracking it. So again, when you start working, be professional all the time. Do not be on the internet surfing when you should be working. Don't be on Facebook posting when you should be working, because someone is monitoring, okay? Our IT department looks at that stuff. The clients that you may be serving are looking at that stuff. So it was very embarrassing for that partner to hear that. You know, so I just want to share that with you.
Okay, thank you for that. And so we'll just open it up now for Q&A. Yes, ma'am.
How does diversity in the workforce affect ethical perspectives of your organization?
You know, one of the things, especially being in the healthcare industry, that you know we've come to acknowledge and appreciate is that the diversity within the workforce, you know, not just expands beyond the realms of female versus male, but the nationality diversity, especially that we experience in the workforce, has really opened our eyes to the necessities of awareness and sensitivity around ethical behavior. Funny enough, not funny, I shouldn't use that, but interesting enough, a couple weeks ago I was called into a meeting where we had hired a physician from another country whose custom was to require females to walk 3 steps behind them, of which he showed up at our organization demanding that staff nurses do that. And so, you know, one of the things that we came, you know, that there obviously were conversations around was drawing awareness, and it opened our eyes to the fact that, you know, we didn't even know that. We should have known that. We should have been aware of that and had somewhat of an intercession prior to his coming on board. But one of the things that we are now starting to do as part of our employment process is we now have third parties that educate and equip us with the custom and ethical behaviors of different countries, different nationalities and different origins, so that we can be prepared to have some proactive conversations as we're bringing in an individual, so that there's this transitioning, if you will, when an individual is coming into our workforce with understood expectations and levels of tolerance or intolerance relative to certain ethical behavior.
You speak a little near and dear to my heart, just because I run a inclusion and diversity forum within our division, and so, you know, it's global. So we even have, you know, Mexico, China, and the goal of that is to really ensure that we're creating a culture that embraces the inclusion and diversity. And I would say, as far as how it ties back to ethics, is part of being ethical is being respectful, right? And so making sure that that culture is there, making sure that we're driving that engagement, making sure that we're driving that education of different perspectives, different backgrounds, different cultures, and bringing that education and learning into our company. Because of that, again, you know, situations where our leadership or our managers or, you know, supervisors, whoever within the company, if they are disrespecting individuals because of their diversity, you know, obviously that's where a little bit of employee relations comes into fact, and we deal with those situations, right? So I would definitely say, you know, making sure as you look across your organization and see how diverse it is, right, that it is crucial for you to bring that education, you to bring that training, and making sure you're part of bringing that culture into the company as well.
In our Atlanta office, we had a partners meeting a few months ago, and the partner in charge of that office is, you know, he's trying to start some new initiatives. You know, we have over 300, you know, employees, including partners, at the firm. there are not a lot of female partners, only about 2. And so he has one female partner wanting to start up initiative, women's initiative, and just kind of address any issues that they may have, how they can advance in their careers at Marlin Jenkins as a female professional accountant, how they can move up the ranks. And so she's starting that initiative, and I'm taking the lead on minority initiative with African Americans. It's only 7 of us in the firm out of 300 employees, and so I'm starting that initiative as well. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Even our AICPA organization is looking at adding diversification in our accounting profession. I remember attending a conference a few years ago, and they have started that initiative as well. And actually, I think they have their first Black African American female chairperson of the AICPA institution. And so that's an initiative that they're starting, and we're trying to take lead as well in our organization, and try to make sure we bring about diversification. I brought on a guy a couple of years ago from Nigeria, and had to explain to my colleagues, because a lot of times Nigerians, people from Africa may come across being too direct. I have a client from Uganda. She's sharp. She's very direct when you're talking to her, and you may get offended, but she means well. She's just very direct, and I have to explain that to her. That's her culture. And she's not being rude. It's just how she talks. And so I try to educate our colleagues on different cultures and dealing with those individuals when we either hire them or we're dealing with them from a client perspective. So.
So I think the question, right, is, we see a lot today on sexual abuse in the workplace and different things like that. How do our companies deal with that, and have there been any changes, right? Obviously our company takes that as zero tolerance, absolutely zero tolerance. And I think the big thing that our employees and you as an employee, when you go in, have to understand is it's not just your perception around it, right? It's how others around you perceive things, right? And I've seen that over and over and over again is, employees get themselves into situations, right? Because you're talking to your coworker, who's your buddy, who you hang out with after work, right? But if Doug and I are like that, right? But Will overhears me, right? That can get you into just as much issue as anything else, right? And so I think it's a lot around, and our policies have been there for a long time, right? It's more about educating on perception and different things and different scenarios that you could come across, I think is the most important aspect, or different changes, I guess I would say, is I think that's always the key to any type of harassment, is understanding it's not just your perception, it's how you're conducting yourself outside of that. So it is absolutely zero tolerance for our company, and I'm sure it's pretty much anywhere, and as you see in even recent news that has been posted, right? It's a lot of zero tolerance anywhere. So
definitely a zero tolerance at Morgan Jenkins. We don't condone that type of activity. We tell our staff, when you're dealing with the clients, keep it professional. You shouldn't be trying to date someone from our client organization. We have strict policies and procedures in place. We talk about what you can wear. Guys shouldn't be wearing fitted shirts, at work. We talk about what females can wear. And sometimes we do have staff that kind of push the envelope, and the male partners will get a female partner to address those issues with those females. But we try to stick to the policy, and we don't condone it, and we haven't had any issues like that that I can recall. Maybe one that a person got fired, but we do not condone it.
And I want to just add to you real quick, and it's not just verbal as well. I will speak from not only just an HR perspective, but my husband's an IT guy, right? Whatever you put out there is never deleted, right? So, it's not just verbal, it's how you're communicating, period, across the organization, and any of those situations can be construed that way, so add that piece.
And just going back to a word I opened up with, for us, especially in the healthcare industry, an industry that, for decades has been probably one of great tolerance towards some unethical behavior, especially towards higher professionals and those supporting staff. And so, roughly 7-8 years ago, we made a conscious effort to take this route of instituting a formal program of civility. So again, getting back to that root element of an individual's behavior, and to Kim and Doug's point that it doesn't just rest on what I perceive as appropriate or inappropriate, but setting somewhat of parameters and guidelines that are very universal across our workforce to say, while Kim may not mind a pat on the back or someone walking up and giving a hug, the reality of it is that this organization, we just don't walk up and give people hugs, because some people that may be offensive, some people may view that as groping. Okay, and so we've done that through our civility training and our civility policies. And to be quite honest with you, one of the things that we've actually done for every employee that comes into our organization, they have to sign a code of ethics charter. And any activity, any reported event that's proven that contradicts that charter is a no tolerance, immediate terms of termination.
Well, our time is running close, and with that being said, I'll pass it over to Dean Wilson.
We're gonna have to sit in our spot. Thank you, Isaac, for moderating, and thank you three for shedding so much light on this topic. I do have one wrap-up question, and you can answer with just a yes or no. You all speak that your companies have strong formal policies and informal policies regarding ethical behavior in your own industry and in your own organization. Have you seen instances where this impacts upper level management and your management teams as well as just the people at the bottom of your organization?
Sure.
This is one of the things for those of you that are looking for jobs, that's the kind of answer you want to see. That it's not just for one set of rules for the staff accountants, but it's also applicable to senior partners as well. And I know in a couple of these instances, upper level managers have lost their jobs over ethical issues. So while on the one hand, it's not something you want to see, nobody wants to see that. And we're seeing, Matt Lauer, you're seeing some very senior people being impacted, and sexual harassment's what's getting all the attention right now. But there are a lot of ethical kinds of decisions that in your profession you're going to be called to make every day. And I think Kim gave some really good advice. If there's a nagging doubt about whether this is right or wrong, my short-term advice is don't do it until you go talk to somebody and explore why you're feeling that way. There's an overwhelming pressure sometimes, especially if this is coming from your manager, to make a decision that you feel conflicted about. Speak up and ask questions. Clarify. And I think that is something that you've heard throughout your degree, whether you're in accounting or HR or marketing management. You've heard us talk about ethics. We wanted to close your careers with us by giving you some examples of people that are dealing with ethics in a little bit different light. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I'm so pleased and proud of our three panelists today, because it's one of my benefits as an instructor is to see, my success isn't a product, it isn't patience, it isn't numbers of audits, it's how well my students do. And so I feel very successful today because of these three. So I'm very proud of them. So thank you, congratulations to all you guys. Thank you for the faculty that came today as well. And thank you again so much to Will and Kim and Doug for coming back and supporting GSW.